This episode of the Sunday Morning Chat Series is brought to you by Classy Communications PR and Advertising. Classy Communications provides public relations and marketing solutions for businesses, professionals, and nonprofit organizations. They can deliver the true meaning of your business with press releases, social media marketing, web development, email marketing, book publishing, and much more. Wherever your potential clients are, they can help you connect with them. Visit classycommunications.net to learn more about their suite of services that can help your business stand out from the rest. Classy Communications is your solution for business success.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. And on this edition of Vegas Hockey Hub, we are getting into the beginning of September. And this has been an interesting time. The Vegas Golden Knights are getting ready for their season, getting their lineup assembled. But over in Russia, the KHL is actually starting their season. As a matter of fact, the KHL normally starts their season a full month ahead of the NHL. They start theirs in September. And while I was doing research and I was studying the KHL, trying to come up with content for here on Vegas Hockey Hub, I came up with a video idea because there turns out that there are 20 players in the KHL that used to be with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And since there is enough players to do this, I decided that we are going to do here for the 2024-2025 season, we are going to create a KHL lineup with former Vegas Golden Knights players. So we're going to have 4 lines on forwards, 3 defensive pairings, and then we will have our 2 goalies. And because I also wanted to make this fit, we're also going to have 3 healthy scratches on this as well, who had ties and connections to the Vegas Golden Knights. So this is going to be a very fun episode and just coming up with a concept of getting a KHL lineup with former Vegas Golden Knights players. It's going to be a real entertaining episode. I'm looking forward to talking about all of this here on Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, to start this out, we're going to go to forward line 1, and we are actually going to talk about who would be the best player on this team, and that is actually the reigning, defending KHL MVP, and that is Nikita Gusev. Now, for anybody who does not remember, Nikita Gusev, Tampa Bay Lightning, gave his rights to the Vegas Golden Knights during the 2017 NHL expansion draft. And then after about 2 years of back and forth, the Vegas Golden Knights would bring over Nikita Gusev, and he would be would sign an entry-level contract with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And it looked like he was really going to become a vital part of the Vegas Golden Knights in 2019. However, he would end up getting traded during the 2019 NHL offseason before even playing a game for the Vegas Golden Knights. He'd be flipped to New Jersey Devils for a second-round pick in 2021, a fourth-round pick in 2021, and a third-round pick in 2020. Now, the ironic part is that there's actually a player later on in this video that was actually drafted from one of those picks that they got in the Nikita Gusev trade. But when it comes to Nikita Gusev, what's interesting is that despite him not playing a single game for the Vegas Golden Knights, since he signed a contract with the Vegas Golden Knights and the fact that he was scheduled to play for Vegas heading into the 2019-2020 season, I am going to be putting him on here. And his KHL career has been really fascinating. I mean, he has played in over 500 games in the KHL. He's played for 5 teams throughout his tenure. And like I mentioned before, him playing for the Dynamo Moscow this past year, in 68 games, he had 89 points and won the season MVP, or as they call in Russia, the Golden Stick in this past season. So the multi-time All-Star and the MVP out there in the KHL. So Nikita Gusev would be on your forward line 1. and paired up alongside him would be someone who, I'm not going to lie, in 2017, 2018, when the Vegas Golden Knights were getting started, they thought that Vadim Shiparov was going to be a vital and key part of the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And anybody, I'm going to take you back to the 2017 offseason when Nikita Gusev was a restricted RFA, with his rights were going to come over to Vegas, and Vadim Shiparov signed that contract to be with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. There was even some potential idea that down the line, Nikita Gusev and Vadim Shiparov would both play together here in Vegas. That was potentially the idea when it came to the 2017, 2018, and before even the season kicked off. So in a weird alternate timeline, we could be talking about 8 seasons later, a actual line of Gusev and Shiparov in an alternate reality somewhere, because Vadim Shiparov did sign with Vegas. He was one of the first people to ever sign with Vegas. And he actually did play and score a goal here in Vegas compared to Nikita Gusev, who never played for Vegas, but he did sign with them. Now, when it comes to Vadim Shiparov, he played for a long time with SKA St. Petersburg, and then he has played with the Dynamo Moscow. Now, this past season, Vadim Shiparov, in 62 games, he only had 44 points, but I do want to remind you that he actually has scored 60 points in a row in 4 of the past 5 years. And he actually joined a new team in this offseason as he signed a 2-year contract with the Dynamo Minsk. So he is going to be with the Minsk out in this KHL season. So for Vadim Shiparov, who has been a multi-time All-Star and has been their MVP twice, this would be one of the best lines in the KHL because you have a multi-time MVP in Nikita Gusev and a multi-time MVP in Vadim Shiparov. That would be on your line 1. And then this is a player who I actually didn't realize how successful he has been in the KHL, and that's Brooks Masick. Now, Brooks Masick, who actually signed with the Vegas Golden Knights in 2018, he was mostly in the AHL for his entire tenure with the Vegas Golden Knights organization. And after spending just 1 year with the Golden Knights AHL team, he put up, 60 points in the AHL. He would go back to the KHL, and he has actually been in the KHL ever since. And in his 5 seasons being in the KHL, he has racked up 40 or more points in 3 seasons. And as a matter of fact, last year, Brooks Masick, 23 goals and 47 points in 67 games in the KHL. So because of his production that he has had in the KHL, Brooks Masick would be on that first line with Vadim Shiparov and Nikita Gusev. And when it comes to the points that this line would put up, I just combined all 3 of their stats from last year to come up with this statistic. But when it comes to this first line, 180 points would be the total from Gusev, Shiparov, and Masick on that forward line 1. So, yeah, this is very interesting how the Vegas Golden Knights, Gusev signed with Vegas but never played for them because they traded him during the 2019 offseason. Vadim Shiparov signed with Vegas, played for a couple of games, and then left the Golden Knights organization. And then Brooks Masick played 1 season in minor league hockey with Vegas before heading off to Russia. And that would be your forward line 1 if you're creating a KHL lineup with former Vegas Golden Knights players. Moving over to the second line here on the forwards, as we are creating this KHL lineup with former Vegas Golden Knights players. Now, on the second line, on the left side, we have somebody the Vegas Golden Knights drafted during the 2017 NHL expansion draft, and that is from the Toronto Maple Leafs and Brendan Lepsic. And Brendan Lepsic is kind of hard to talk about because we can't really discuss the off-the-ice situation because when it comes to Brendan Lepsick, there was an incident that caused him to be out of the NHL, caused him to no longer be in pro hockey over here in North America, and more or less brought him over to the KHL as a default. But not addressing that and just focusing on his KHL stats. How has Brendan Lepsick done since being in the KHL? Well, after his fourth season of being in the KHL and him being on 4 different teams in 5 years, Brendan Lepsick has actually been a reasonable player statistically. First year being with Moscow, CSKA Moscow. In 42 games, he had 24 points, and then he racked up half a point per game in the playoffs in 2021. And then 2021, 2022, he would go to a brand new team, and in 46 games, he would have 16 goals in the regular season that year, and then would become a playoff hero for that organization. As in 24 playoff games in 2022, Brendan Lepsick would have 11 goals and 20 points, almost averaging a point per game in the 2022 playoffs out there in the KHL. Now, all of this is coming from Hockey DB. That is my reference there. And then the following season in 2022, 2023, he would play in 65 games and rack up 44 points. That is his most productive season of him being in the KHL. And then he would actually average a point per game in the 2023 KHL playoffs. And this past season, he actually got injured in 23-24 and only played in 21 games, racking up 2 goals this past season. So excluding the injury-riddled season last year, I mean, Brendan Lepsick has been a 35 to 40 point scorer out there in the KHL. So he would be a middle 6 forward out there in the KHL. So that would be on the left side with Brendan Lepsick. And then at center, we have somebody who has his rights attached to the Vegas Golden Knights, despite not being with the Golden Knights organization right now. Thanks to the Noah Hanifin trade, the Philadelphia Flyers sent Mikhail Vorobyev over to the Vegas Golden Knights. And what's fascinating about him is that because the Vegas Golden Knights do have his rights, if he ever went back to North America and he ever decided to play in the NHL, the Vegas Golden Knights would still have the ability to keep him there because his signing rights are with us. Now, when it comes to Vorobyev, this is a player who in 6 seasons being in the KHL, he has been a productive 35 to 40 point scorer out there in the KHL. Now, his past 3 seasons and entering season 4 of him being with the SKA St. Petersburg, this past year in 61 games, he racked up 17 goals and 41 points for St. Petersburg. So when it comes to Vorobyev, this is going to be a player that would be a middle 6 forward type again. I mean, 41 points would be for him. You know, Lepsick, 44 points over there on his end. And then on the right side, we have a guy who never suited up in the NHL for the Vegas Golden Knights, but he did play 1 season in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights, and that is Spencer Fu. Now, Spencer Fu, who has actually spent 5 seasons now in the KHL. This season is going to be season 5 with the Red Star, which is not a Russian team, but is actually a team based in China, and it being in season 5. Now, this past season, he has had in 54 games played, 13 goals and 29 points for Spencer Fu. It's also the same guy who has represented China internationally during the Olympics and everything. But when it comes to Spencer Fu, he would be a reasonable second-line winger that you would team him up with Vorobyev and with Lepsick on that second line. So, like I mentioned, your first line would have 2 MVPs in Nikita Gusev and Vadim Shipperov. And then you would have Brooks Masick, who has been a productive player in the KHL. And then on the second line would be Brendan Lepsick, Mikhail Vorobyev, and then Spencer Fu would be on that second line. So that's your top six that you would have in the KHL. Very productive would be that team. And I mentioned with that first line that 180 points would be the production. Well, when I combine the second line together, that would end up getting me with a good 114 points. So, when it comes to the KHL, 180 points for 3 players on line 1, that's solid. 114 points would be on that second line. That would be something that would be very presentable and respectable on that second line. Now, let's get into the rest of the middle 6, and let's get to the forward line 3. Now, on the left side here for the forward line 3, we have a player who is signed to a PTO, not this past season, but the season prior, and that was Maxime Comtois. And Maxime Comtois, he did not make it past his PTO. He got released from that PTO with the Vegas Golden Knights. So despite not suiting up in a regular season game for the Vegas Golden Knights, the fact that he was signed to a professional tryout agreement and the fact that he actually played in the preseason for the Vegas Golden Knights, he is going to be counted on here. And after spending all of last year in the AHL with the Chicago Wolves, putting up 44 points and 100 penalty minutes in 65 games with Chicago Wolves this past year, Maxime Comtois in July of this year decided to take his talents to Russia and the KHL and signed with the Dynamo Moscow. And it'll be interesting to see how he performs with the Dynamo Moscow. And because he does not have any stats in the KHL yet, it's kind of hard to measure how he's going to do. Kind of similar to 2 other players that I'm going to be talking about on the forward line 4. Because they are first-time KHLers, I only have to use their AHL and NHL stats as my reference point here. So for Maxime Comtois, in 100 AHL games, he ended up having 29 goals and would rack up 75 points in 100 games in the AHL. And then in the NHL side, playing in over 200 games and would rack up 87 points and just under 200 penalty minutes during that thing. So when it comes to Maxime Comtois, he is not afraid to be physical. Like I mentioned, he had just under 200 penalty minutes in the NHL, and he racked up 160 penalty minutes in the AHL. So for Maxime Comtois, him being sent over to the KHL this offseason, he'll be on that forward line 3. Ivan Morozov, who was a prospect with the Vegas Golden Knights and one of the highly drafted prospects with the Vegas Golden Knights, was taken in the second round in 2018. Now, after spending 2 seasons in the KHL the past year, I will say Ivan Morozov, he spent 2 seasons in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights, and after only playing in just 61 games here with the Vegas Golden Knights AHL system, decided to go back to Moscow and play in the KHL this past year. And in 37 games, he had 11 goals and 38 points. So, hey, for a half a season kind of a production, he had a point per game. So that was something that you would want to have on that forward line 3. It's also the same Ivan Morozov, who has only had a career high of 38 points in the KHL. He's had 2 30-point seasons, but he has not cracked 40 yet in his career. Now, the upside for Ivan Morozov is that he is 24 years old, and because he is 24, he still has time and still has the ability to progress in the KHL with Moscow, and it's going to be interesting to see how he does this year, but he would be my center on forward line 3. And then on the right side, we have the 2017 Vegas Golden Knights preseason MVP, and I'm talking about Tyler Wong. Now, for anybody who was there in 2017, Tyler Wong actually scored the really scored a lot of goals in that 2017 preseason with the Vegas Golden Knights. And despite him only spending 2 seasons in the Golden Knights organization, the first 2 years, mostly in the AHL, never got called up to the NHL with Vegas. Well, he went over to the Red Star out there in the KHL, the China-based team, and he has actually been there for the past 5 seasons, and his most recent tenure was actually the most points he has scored in his career, as Tyler Wong in 67 games had 7 goals and 31 points for the Red Star out there in the KHL. Now, he is going to be entering season 6 of him being in the KHL this year. We'll be interested to see how he does. But yeah, Tyler Wong, him being on that right side, Maxime Comtois on the left, and then Ivan Morozov on the center. So, yeah, I mean, you have a 29-year-old, you have a 24-year-old, and then you have a 25-year-old. So this is kind of more the relatively younger guys that you would have in the lineup when it comes to this KHL lineup of former Vegas Golden Knights players. Now, the fourth line here on the forwards is actually going to consist of 3 players who spent part-time with the Vegas Golden Knights and actually made starts with the Vegas Golden Knights. And on the left side, we're going to go with Thomas Yurko, former second-round pick by the Detroit Red Wings. He's had an interesting tenure in the NHL. He bounced around from, Chicago to Edmonton. And then he spent 1 season with the Vegas Golden Knights, played 8 games with them in the COVID-19 shortened 2020 season. For anybody who does not remember that, I would not blame you if you totally forgot that Thomas Yurko played 8 games for the Vegas Golden Knights. Only put up 1 point during that tenure. He did spend about 20 games in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights and actually had half a point per game and actually averaged a penalty minute per game in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights. But after leaving the Vegas Golden Knights organization, he went over to the KHL, and he has actually been with 3 different teams in 3 seasons. So this past year, he actually had 21 games played, and he had 8 goals and 16 points on that so being on a fourth line, 16 points, that would kind of be interesting there. I will say when it comes to Thomas Yurko, his career high in those 3 seasons are actually with the Red Star, the Chinese-based team, and that was in 22-23. He had 10 goals and 15 assists with the Red Star that year. So, I mean, that's a bottom 6 type of forward. This is going to be a guy who's going to get you, 8 to 10 goals. He'll get you 10 to 15 assists per year. But yeah, so the NHLer, a guy who played over 200 games in the NHL, and that would be Thomas Yurko. Following him would be the 2 players who are the most recent additions to the KHL, and that is Byron Fries. Now, Byron Fries is with the Vegas Golden Knights the past season, and he was with the Vegas Golden Knights, played in 25 games as a member of the VGK, and he would play with 1 goal and 3 points as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights. Was more successful in the AHL with the Henderson Silver Knights, as he actually racked up back-to-back 30-point seasons in the AHL, but like I mentioned, just 25 games played in the NHL. Now, he is going to be going over to the Locomotive out there in the KHL. And since, once again, very similar to Maxime Comtois, because we don't have any stats on his KHL, since this is his first time being in the KHL, it's kind of hard to, base what he's going to do. But I'm going to use his AHL and NHL statistics to kind of, prove my point here. So Byron Fries, throughout his career, he has played in over 500 AHL games and has racked up 300 points in his AHL career. And then over in the NHL, he has played 140 games with just 20 points. So for Byron Fries, him being on that fourth line, and then following him would actually be someone he would be familiar with in the AHL, and that was Sheldon Rempel. very similar to Byron Freeze. He left the Vegas Golden Knights this offseason and signed with the KHL in July. We'll see how he does. I mean, Sheldon Rempel only played 10 games as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, had 2 goals, though, so that's good for him. And then over in the AHL, he had back-to-back 25-goal seasons and actually had a 60-point season in Henderson in 2022-2023. Now, for Sheldon Rempel, he had played in just 20 NHL games throughout his career and has only had 2 goals to show for it. So for Sheldon Rempel, him being on that fourth line with Byron Freeze and with Thomas Yurko, that would be what your forward lines would be. So to kind of go back to what we're talking about here, creating a KHL lineup with former Vegas Golden Knights players. On forward line 1 would be Nikita Gusev, Vadim Shipperov, and Brooks Masick. On forward line 2 would be Brendan Lepsick, Mikhail Vorobev, and with Spencer Fu. And forward line 3 would be Maxime Comtois, Ivan Morozev, and Tyler Wong. And then on the fourth line would be Thomas Yurko, Byron Freeze, and Sheldon Rempel. Now, the defense, I'm kind of cheating here. I'm kind of cheating because half of them are former KHL players and half of them are current KHL players. So because they didn't have enough defensemen that are currently in the KHL, I had to modify it just a little bit. On defensive pairing 1, we have Ryan Murphy, who actually was an all-star with the Henderson Silver Knights when he played for the Golden Knights organization, his one and only year that he was with the Golden Knights organization, a former first-round pick in the NHL. They would move over to the KHL and actually played 3 seasons in the KHL. And, it's kind of interesting how this past year he had 43 games played, 4 goals, and 17 points. Now, when it comes to Ryan Murphy, he is officially not on any roster in Russia, but he did play, in 2023. So maybe something will happen later this year. And then his pairing mate would be a former KHL player who went over to North America, and that was Daniil Myromanov. Now, like I said, I am kind of cheating a little bit, but he did spend time in the KHL before getting brought over to the Vegas Golden Knights. On defensive pairing 2, we have 2 AHL players who were with the Chicago Wolves and the Henderson Silver Knights before being brought over to the KHL. I'm talking about Zach Leslie. Now, Zach Leslie in the KHL this past year with the Red Star, the China-based team, in 30 games, he had 3 goals and 7 points in the KHL, and going off his second season playing for the Red Star. Now, I do have to mention that Zach Leslie is kind of similar to Ryan Murphy. He is not signed to a KHL team for the 2024-2025 season, but since he played in this past year, I'm going to be including him on here. And then Ian McCoshen, who, by the way, great first name. Now, he is actually going to be in the KHL for the first time in his career as he signed with the Red Star in the KHL. The former Henderson Silver Knight who spent the 21-22 season with them had 11 points in 60 games, but added a penalty minute per game while he was in Henderson. And be interesting to see if he does well in the KHL with the Red Star out there in the KHL. So that's defensive pairing 2. And then defensive pairing 3, we have a prospect and a guy who they acquired in the Nikita Gusev trade in Daniel Chaka. And because he has ties to the KHL and the fact that he has played in the KHL, that's the reason why I'm including him on this. Just because, there is a chance that eventually he might make his way back to the KHL because he has been in Henderson for the past 2 seasons, about to be season 3 of him being in the AHL with Vegas. I got a feeling he may not be happy with that. And then Griffin Reinhart, who was with the 2017 NHL expansion draft, he, after leaving those final 2 seasons, he played with the Vegas Golden Knights. After 2019, him playing in the AHL both years, he went over to the Red Star in the KHL, spent 1 season in the KHL, and then pretty much called it quits after the 2022 season. So, yeah, like I said, I'm technically cheating here, but that's okay. Goalie-wise, Zachary Vukal, who spent time in the AHL with the Vegas Golden Knights, and their goalie prospect, Pavel Moisevich, would be the goalies for the Vegas Golden Knights KHL lineup. And then your healthy scratches would be Valentin Zykov, Danny O'Regan, and Dylan Sakura would be your scratches there. So, yeah, like I said, this is a fun video. I just want to take a minute and talk about the former Vegas Golden Knights players in the KHL. So I decided to, be creative and come up with a lineup for the KHL. So this was a fun video. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. Go Knights, go, and have a good one.